Chapter 19. On the Hunt. Hanging between dreams and wakefulness, a strange stillness slowly took hold of Badass. The haze blended everything together. The angry birds circling above the lake, the giant frogs, the robots spraying laser beams, and Lady. Only the squeaking of Nicey's door stirred him from his slumber. Badass squinted and saw the first rays of the morning sun glowing through cracks in the wall. He heard Nicey take over for Tula. Unable to fall asleep again, Badass rose and went outside. "Go and rest. I kept the bed warm for you," he told Tula, who disappeared behind the badger skins without a word, happy to be back in his beloved shack. It appeared that Badass wasn't the only early riser. All the newly rescued were gathered around the campfire, shaking with the cold, brewing tea and cooking spider rat eggs. Lady was among them. Badass avoided glancing toward her. How strange that I didn't even hear them, he thought. I must have been asleep without realizing it. The mood around the fire was grim. People were whispering through gritted teeth and snapping at each other for no reason. Nicey stood apart from the others at the very edge of the trunk, in a fork between two branches, leaning on a spear tipped with bone from an unknown animal, and staring intently at something below. Badass wandered over and looked down. 3 spider rats were bustling about near the lowest branches of the giant fir. "What are they doing?" Badass asked. "I don't know," Nicey replied. "That's new. We use them for their silk and gather their eggs for food, but we don't know a great deal about their habits. It doesn't seem like they're trying to attack us. Let them be, and we'll see what comes of it." Nicey lowered her voice and glanced towards the fire. "In that sense, the whole village is like those spider rats. We're a bunch of people thrown from a high-tech, fully artificial starship environment onto a primitive world, just emerging from hibernation, with no preparation and no equipment. It's clear that no help is coming, not anytime soon. Here we are, and here we must live, but we have no idea what life's supposed to be like." A sudden squeal came from the campfire, followed by loud shouts from many mouths, accompanied by heated swearing. Someone had tipped over the dented tin pot of boiling tea water, burning several people. They clamoured loudly and accused each other. "What on earth are they doing?" wondered Badass. He noticed to his astonishment that even Lady, normally so timid, was red with anger, cursing one of her companions. Nicey clenched her spear, her expression stony. "They're good people, but in such a state as to be ready to slit one another's throat just for looking at them wrong. They lost their civilized manners somewhere along the way from the ship to planetside, turning all these good people into a primitive herd of wolverines. I wouldn't have thought that our culture is only as thin as its technological shell." Let's go calm them down," said Badass. "You're the village leader after all." Nicey's mouth was a hard line. "I'm so tense myself, I'd gladly stick some of them through if that would shut them up." Suddenly, a fight erupted around the fire. The 4 newcomers had split in 2, writhing on the ground, tearing and biting and pulling at each other's hair. The whole village was filled with screeching and howling. Everybody who had still been sleeping was soon out of their doors, a weapon in hand, ready to repel this invasion of wild beasts. Seeing not a horde of spider rats, but 4 humans struggling on the ground, they froze in shared surprise. "What the hell are you shouting for, you damn wolverines?" yelled Badger Bart, his expression sleepy and startled. But when the 4 scrappers paid him no heed, he set his weapon aside and reached into his hut for a stick with the blade still unattached. He rushed into their midst, swinging it about, and started dealing furious whacks. "Get, you animals, calm down!" Tula and Nicey went to Bart's aid, but instead of calming and withdrawing, the 4 turned towards the new threat. Each of them had taken a hit from another, and now they stormed the common enemy. Tula and Nicey were pushed down, and only Badger Bart could keep the attackers at bay, giving the first one to approach a decent knock on the head, so he dropped, dazed. Other villagers were now rushing to their friend's aid. "Stop! Stop!" Badass jumped between the 2, narrowly avoiding Lady's kick from one side and Badger Bart's stick from another. "The spider rats are coming!" he yelled, pointing toward the edge of the trunk. The squabbling ceased instantly, and everyone turned to look. They stood there panting for a while until Badger Bart stepped up to the forking branches and looked down. "There's no spider rats here." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and hostile looks turned toward Badass. He glared back at them. "Yeah, there ain't, but if they should return, do we want to be beaten bloody to have killed each other?" Badass waved his hand around. "Yes, this is not the apex of thousands of years of technological evolution, not like our home, the starship. We've been thrown onto this world and we will die here. It can't be helped. We can't change the past. But we can change our future. This is a historic moment. Do we fight amongst ourselves and die here today, or build a new life and die of old age among our grandchildren, in a nice house, in a pretty town, in a friendly neighbourhood that we've built from scratch?" The community of Spruce Top stood in silence, listening to Badass speak. For a moment, all squabbles were forgotten, and Badass felt he had to carry on, to instill in them some hope for the future, or it would all fall apart. "Nothing is broken beyond repair," he continued. "Our starship was sent to find Earth, ejected from the orbit of its star by an ancient catastrophe, and to settle it again. We were supposed to build the first settlement, assemble the Stargate we brought along, and establish a swift connection with our homeworld. Together we would render the Earth habitable again, uncover ancient history, and rebuild our civilization. Okay, so this sadly isn't Earth, but we were created, grown, and trained in the ship's genetics labs for exactly this mission, the resettlement of a planet. Let's do it then. We won't get any other chance for a normal life. Yes, the ship was destroyed and all our equipment along with it, but we survived. We were actually lucky, believe it or not. The world around us isn't a rocky desert with no atmosphere, as Earth was predicted to be. On the contrary, this world is full of life and mystery, so let us settle here, solve these mysteries, and build a life worth living." "Badass is right," agreed Nicey. "Stop fighting among each other." "But she poured boiling water all over me," a newcomer with a bloody face complained. Badass closed his eyes for a moment and slowly counted to 3. When his eyes opened, he smiled and asked, "What's your name, friend?" "Carl." "Listen, Carl." Badass chose his words carefully. "I understand that the landing was hard, the night was cold, and now you're hungry, but we can only overcome this together. Knocking Lady on the head isn't going to warm you tomorrow night or feed you today." "And what will warm me at night?" Badass noticed that they were all looking at him. The question came from Carl, but they were all thinking about it. These people were at a crossroads. They would either fight each other or work together, and his next words would tip them toward one side or the other. "Badger hunt," Badass said. "What?" asked Carl, and Badass repeated, even though the words hurt. "A badger hunt will warm us at night and fill our bellies. The badgers, not Lady, will give you a warm skin to sleep under, and their hunting grounds will give us game to feed ourselves." "Hear, hear," thundered Badger Bart. "Listen to Badass. The man knows what he's talking about." "Yeah, sure he knows," added Tula. "He spent the whole night under my skins." Someone snorted, and suddenly the tension that had hung between them was swept away. "To work. From now on, we're settlers, not castaways in space. Don't think small. Our goal isn't to survive another night. Our goal is to build a civilization." Badass turned to Nicey. "Let everyone bring out their food supplies. Let's eat our fill. Badger Bart, find everyone a weapon and show them how to use it quickly. Tula, let the newcomers wind up your generator. Let's charge all the nanobots to at least 3%. That will heal our cuts and scrapes, and new injuries won't be life-threatening." The village burst into activity. Everyone suddenly had a goal, and petty arguments were forgotten. They all wanted warmth and food and were ready to work for it. People were already laughing about their previous squabbles, and Tula's hut came alive with shouts and the owner's calm explanation. Badger Bart stood at his door distributing tips and hunting weapons. Half his hut seemed to be full of the latter. Badass stepped aside and considered this hustle thoughtfully. He didn't even notice when Nicey appeared beside him, having handed the villagers' food supplies to those milling about the campfire. "That was well done," she said. Badass smiled, but the smile slowly sank into a bitter grin. The cost of the villagers' unity was a hunting expedition to the Badger settlement against creatures who had trusted him and who had taken Ko hostage. Let's hope they will hide as agreed, Badass thought. Seeing how the dispute developed and how the warring sides always joined in the face of a new threat, I realised the only thing that can save this village is an external enemy. The badger hunt doesn't really excite me. I think we would gain much more from friendly interactions. But it was the only thing I could think of. "Don't worry," Nicey replied. "You did the right thing. We need common activities to learn to work together. We need skins, and we need meat. The badgers are the perfect solution. 3 in 1 to start a human society. Just one thing. We need to give this world a name." "Mortalis," said Badass. "It means mortality, and I'm afraid that putting mortality, our own, and that of all the living things on Mortalis, to the test will be our main activity." "Mortalis," repeated Nicey slowly, tasting every letter in that word. Well, let it be so. Once we return from the hunt, we'll christen this name properly." "I'm afraid we'll christen it during the hunt," remarked Badass. Nicey laughed, but Badass didn't. They joined the preparations, and, after a few hours, the Spruce Top hunting party set off toward the badger den, with full stomachs, well armed and determined.